everybody. Just in case you haven't been keeping up with current affairs, the United States has a new commander-in-chief. I know, shock to me too, I hardly even noticed it. But he recently said that he's upset about the fact that us Europeans don't buy enough American cars. And though we here in Great Britain are no longer part of the EU, I do still consider myself a European. Of course, ask any car fan here and they will give you no fewer than 101 reasons that we don't buy American cars. But I shall summarize for you. They're big, they're thirsty, and they're crap. But that's a terrible generalization, isn't it? That's an awful way to damn an entire country's output, and a country so heavily associated with the automobile. Is there more to it than that? Are we missing out on some great stuff? Well, to try and answer that question today, I am behind the wheel of this 2019 Dodge Challenger RT. And I'm rather looking forward to this. Now, I will confess that when it comes to trying to review American market cars, I have the devil's own task. Because you see, in the States, you know these cars, you know them well, and if you're an American car fan, quite honestly, to us Brits, you have almost supernatural powers of perception. I will never ever cease to be amazed by old episodes of Roadkill, RIP, love you guys Freiberger and Finnegan, and they walk through scrapyards, junkyards or dealerships and they go, oh yeah, that's a 68, that's a 67, that's a 69 and a half, but actually it's got a 70 front bumper on it. And I'm honestly bemused. I just don't get how they keep up with all of these cars. But I suppose, to us Europeans, maybe it's easy because in America they only have 3 cars anyway. They've got a Ford, they've got a Chevy, and they've got a Dodge. Of course, the reality is a little bit more complicated than that, but for sexy, iconic cars, they rarely come better than this, the Dodge Challenger, which, again, us Europeans might not know, actually took a quarter of a century holiday, going out of production for its second generation in 1983, and not resuming until 2008. When this third generation landed, and it wound up being a relatively long-lived thing, only retiring a couple of years ago in 2023. And it was potentially a response to the popularity of the 5th gen Ford Mustang, which itself was a more retro-styled affair, and in this time you also saw the arrival of the 5th generation Camaro, which you may know best as Bumblebee from the Transformers films. Now, for those not familiar, what actually is this? Well, on top, of course, you have this gloriously retro-styled body, which is a real throwback to cars of old, namely the Challenger and the Charger. Underneath, it's an interesting affair. It's built on effectively the same underpinnings as the Chrysler 300C and the Dodge Magnum, which, if you don't know that, is basically the estate version of the 300, which here in Britain we just called the 300C estate. And because this comes from the era of FCA, it actually took a lot of parts from the Mercedes bin. So the front suspension is effectively that of a W220 S-Class, the rear is that of a W211 E-Class, and of course, the interior is made from recycled dustbins. Though I am being a little bit harsh. You know what? In this particular car, it feels fine. And I remind you, this pretty much fully loaded 29RT when new carried a sticker price of just $53,000. When the car launched in 2008, it was actually a relatively limited edition affair, with not that many being constructed and not much variety in the specification. So they were all built to the SRT8 trim with the 6.1 litre Hemi, and equipped with a 5-speed automatic gearbox. From 2009, they then broadened the range, so you saw the introduction of the entry-level SE, known in other markets as the SXT, and then after a few years as the SXT globally. That's brought with it an initially 3.5-litre Pentastar V6, later 3.6-litre. Then in the middle you got this, the RT, the mainstay of the range, which for its power plant got given a 5.7-litre version of the famous Hemi engine, making around 370 horsepower and 400 pounds-feet of torque. That's 540 newton meters, to which you could either have a 5-speed Mercedes-derived automatic attached or a 6-speed Tremec manual. Over the years, the specification was revised, trim levels changed, broadened, then narrowed, but in 2015, the model saw one of its biggest updates and its real major facelift, and for us petrol heads, that is significant because it's the year that saw the introduction of the mighty Hellcat. Powered by a supercharged variant of a 6.2-litre Hemi, it made 707 horsepower. A little later, they then did the Madcap Demon, aimed really at the drag racing market, though ironically, it was so fast that the Hot Rod Association in America banned it from competing because it didn't come with the roll cage that they required of a car that quick. Impressive stuff. That's the one that you might remember comes only with one seat by default, and you can buy the rest for $1, and you can also get a box of goodies for another $1 that turn it into a drag strip missile. Very cool, very, very American. And just in case you are watching from across the pond, today I have seen 2 Audi R8s, but this is almost certain to be the only challenger that I'll spot. Here, I would say, depending on where it is that you live, seeing one of these is about as commonplace as seeing a Ferrari. A Porsche 911 by comparison is far, far more popular. And a good part of this, and maybe one of the reasons that American cars aren't so commonplace here in Britain, is the fact that we don't really have all that many dealers for them. But we certainly do have American car fans, like Patrick, who owns this. Previous to it, he had a Chevrolet Camaro SS, a 2013 model, and that is a car that I really, really like. And if they did do it in right-hand drive, I would say is a better buy than many an M3. Sounds nuts, I know, but believe me, it is true. He is now retired, but over his time has had a great variety of different American cars, chiefly Chevrolets, but decided recently to dabble with the Dodge. And he's had it for 4 years, and looks to me like he's very much enjoying it. Initially, he wanted to get one in the plum crazy colour, a purple that I really do admire. It's a bit of me, that. Instead, he settled for this rather striking blue, and I'm happy to say it makes it stand out a little bit more compared with the regular red that you tend to see them in, which is a bit of a flat and disappointing colour. Ooh, aroma. A very nice shade. I like. In terms of practicality, like many an American classic, it's not quite as good as it should be for the size of car, but you will, just about, get 4 adults in here, and the boot is fairly generous. So if you want to take it away on a road trip or anything like that, it's great. And I suppose if you are the sort of person that likes to do a European road trip, well, you're automatically on the correct side of the car. And these are cars which I know do get a bit of stick from European car fans because they're not meant to be subtle. I mean, this has a dirty great big air scoop sticking out the bonnet, part of the shaker pack that this has. It's got cutouts in the front indicators, which here are not functional, in other models they are, and they're very, very cool. Mechanically, the car is almost entirely standard, save for a resonator delete in the exhaust, which you'll get to hear very shortly. But all he's really done is a few little cosmetic bits, like putting some of the B's on and taking off some of the Dodge badging. The ones on the side I really like because the way he's put it on, he's cut out the little wheel that it normally surrounds and placed the indicator bulb there. So when that's on, it looks like the bee's tail is lighting up. I like that a lot. And this is exactly the kind of car that I know makes small children very happy. And to be perfectly honest, fully grown adults too, because it looks awesome, it sounds great, and yeah, sure, we know that it's not particularly quick, because yes, it does have lots of power, but it also weighs almost 2 tons. This RT tipping the scales at just over 1,900 kilos. But there are plenty of European cars you could say the same thing about. Why then is it people don't go for these? Well, the common answers are the fact that they are available only in left-hand drive. More of a problem, of course, here in Britain than in the rest of Europe. They are very thirsty, they can't handle, and they are incredibly badly built. Is that true? I suppose I should really find out. And to do so, I'm going to press not the Super Track Pack button down here that I asked Patrick about and he doesn't really know what it does. Instead, I'm going to press Sport, which opens a little valve in the exhaust, sets the traction control to Sport, and I'm also going to go for manual mode in the gearbox, which actually doesn't have a paddle anywhere near as big as I thought. Below these, what look like big paddles are actually the buttons you get on many FCA products. Now, this is a big thing, so I'm going to take a moment, get a clear view of the road, put my foot down, and see what she's got. Well, this is a very, very interesting car. In a lot of ways, it really does drive exactly how you'd expect it to. It clearly is not built for this kind of road, and you just can't hold that against it, can you? This is instead a car built for people that live their life a quarter mile at a time. I do, though, still have what I believe to be some very valid criticisms, amongst which are not the steering, which I've got to say is a real pleasant highlight. You wouldn't think it, would you? Big American muscle car, I just expect it to be limp and lifeless. But, like that Camaro SS, it's actually surprisingly good. It turns in a lot keener than you think that it might. This, compared with the rental spec V6 Challenger that I drove at Christmas time, is much, much keener. Also quite a bit firmer set up, though not punishing, and once you do get a wriggle on, it behaves itself much better. In the bends, you do get a little bit of weighting. You can see a fair bit of that bonnet, and it does simply make you aware of how much of the road you're taking up, but it is a pleasant thing to steer this. It's a very, very enjoyable 7/10ths car. However, I am being very, very deliberate with my application of the throttle, because in spite of the fact this car is equipped with just about every optional handling and performance pack you could get, as RTs go, it's very well specified, it still has just 245 section wide tyres. Now they're wrapped around 20-inch rims, which look pretty good. They've been resprayed in Porsche's white gold, and I think suit the car down to the ground. But 245 for a car with 400 pounds-feet of torque. That's narrower than what you get on the back of an old E46 M3, which has something like 2/3 of the torque this makes. I do believe you can option them up to 275, and that is probably about right. Never really sure what it is with these cars. Every time I look at them from the back, if there's something like this, they do look a bit like a BMW i3. They look like someone's put economy tyres on the thing. Okay, there's a lot of weight pressing them down into the ground, but I've no interest in trying to light up that rear because, well, if it goes wrong, it could go wrong rather quickly. At the very least, they do give you a proper limited slip differential, so at least there's that. Now, what's the turning circle and manoeuvrability like? This car is equipped with the 8-speed ZF automatic, which became an option throughout the car's life, replacing the old 5-speed. And it also is another disappointment. Left to its own devices, it's fine, but even in sport mode, it's not particularly responsive. Very, very frustrating. This must be one of the worst applications of this gearbox that I've encountered. Allow me to demonstrate. Right, I'm doing 45 mile an hour. It also changes for you, which is frustrating. I'm going to put it into proper manual mode and hopefully it'll stop. But there you go. So ask for the shift there, and that's the shift. Why? There's no need. You're not even revving that high. The red line's like 6,000. And then it dobs you in.
The speed limit is 60 miles per hour.
That was 61, officer, I promise. And the fact is, it really isn't as quick as something with this amount of power and torque should be, and that's because of the weight. It's also geared very long, but it's got enough gears that it's not a problem. On the upside, this car does perform in a way that you wouldn't expect it to. Economy. As an average, Patrick's been getting about 23 to the gallon out of this. For my friends watching from abroad, we have translated into UK MPG, which is different to US. Our gallons are actually bigger. On a run though, the long gearing of the 8-speed box combined with the standard cylinder deactivation that this has means that he can get over 40 if you keep it to say about 60 mile an hour or so. And that's incredible. These are also, even here in Britain, not particularly expensive cars to run, because if something does go wrong, the parts are cheap. Okay, not as cheap or easy to get as they would be in the States, where I think just about every corner shop can sell you a Elephant crate engine, but even so, they're a lot cheaper to run than just about any European sports car I can think of. I could blow this engine to pieces and it'd cost me £5,000. That's it. That's unbelievable. Say what you will about Americans and their cars, but there are certain things that they just do right. And giving the customer a good supply of spare parts for a long time at a reasonable price is something that I think we really should celebrate. Well done, Uncle Sam. Now, back on the negative side, one of the issues you will face is the fact that there aren't really many official Dodge dealers here in the UK. And when I asked Patrick if he took his car to one, he said to me, very wisely, "Would you let Stellantis work on your car?" And I had to think for a moment, and I said, no, I wouldn't. I don't really know what they're doing at the moment, and I'm not sure they do either. Bit of a mess, that. I don't think the suspension in here needs to be anywhere near as firm as it is. It's not crashy, it's just constantly fidgety. As far as I can tell, there are no adaptive dampers or anything like that, so pressing the sport button doesn't really make much of a difference. Brakes, well, they seem okay, but I've had no real need to put them to work. Alamo might have described this as a sports car, but we know it's not. That's a sports car. Now, let's check another big issue with these cars, visibility. Even in the States it wasn't great, and here it's going to be bad. You are, of course, on the wrong side of the car, which can be an issue for some drivers and in certain situations, but because it's got this kind of pillarless style, it's not actually pillarless like the concept, there are B-pillars here just hidden, you've got to be careful, but if you plan for it, it's all right. Oh, yes. Now I've put it in manual mode, it's also stopped changing gear even when I put my foot all the way down. I thought simply pulling a paddle would do it, apparently not. That one's on me. All right then, build quality. Well, look, it's not the best. There are a few little creaks in here, but nothing horrendous. When I opened the door, I noticed a few big gaps where you can see pieces that in any other European car you probably wouldn't be able to see. But also, in what European car are you going to get this kind of engine for this kind of money? This is a very simple, back to basics, wears its heart on its sleeve recipe for a car. And I have a lot of time for that. Unfortunately, one of the other stumbling blocks these have is that people never quite seem to understand how prices work. Because what they'll do is they'll look at the US price for something like this, which is $53,000 RRP. Thing is, what most people then do is run that through a currency converter, and even with presently a pretty poor exchange rate, that'll tell you this car should cost between £40,000 and £45,000. Fact is, it wouldn't have when new. It instead would have cost likely closer to 60, because on top of that $50,000 price, you have to add 20% VAT and, I believe, 10% import duty. And by the time you've done that, and then you're looking at a car that costs quite a bit more, it's very easy why somebody might look at it and go, yeah, nice idea, but actually, I'll have a used C63 instead. Not that anybody's bought the new one of those with the 4-cylinder. Silly Mercedes. Not quick, grip's okay, I'm testing it ever so slightly. I don't really want to light those rears. I know I have some traction, but how much, I'm not sure. Still, linear, predictable power, throttle response.
Is 60 miles per hour.
I know, I live here. Where was I? Yes, traction, it's actually not been terrible, but I just don't trust those tyres. I just don't, sorry. The good news is, if you are brave enough to buy one of these, because they are fairly rare, they also just don't really depreciate. Patrick's had this now for 4 years, and in reality, he's probably lost maybe 5 to 10 grand, which for a car like this is very, very good. He could have bought a brand new BMW 320d and lost a whole lot more. It would have been ruinous by comparison. And the thing is, this isn't the car for everybody. It's just not. There is a simple reason why us Brits don't buy American cars, and it's because they don't make cars for us. On holiday in LA recently, when I had one of these, I noticed that even the Challenger was quite big for a lot of car parks in Los Angeles. And as for the big trucks, not the F-150s, I'm talking the F-250s and F-350s, by American standards, they're comically big. I know a few people that run a Dodge Ram here, and they're so tricky, they're so difficult. If I was driving a Dodge Ram down that road, I'd be terrified. Here, I might only once or twice be troubling the speed limit. It'll telltale you. But I've had a good time. I've had fun. I've enjoyed this. Would I ever buy one? No, because it's not really the car for me. But it's a really interesting, compelling package. A huge number of people I know would be put off simply by the whole left-hand drive bit. I get that, but honestly, it kind of makes these quite affordable. It makes them rare. That's the reason they don't devalue, because you just don't have that many to choose from secondhand. And a word of advice from Patrick. These cars, they can, not always, but they can attract a certain crowd. Again, not unlike your C63s and so on. And there are a few unscrupulous dealers out there that'll claim to sell these at what look like very good prices, but they will be bad examples. Pay just a little bit more, get it from a reputable, decent specialist, and they do exist. And you should have a relatively trouble-free motoring experience. The whole thing is designed to be deliberately understressed. The whole thing is designed to be easy. This car is built to cruise through the Nevadan desert at 50 degrees. The roads of Britain should pose no problem whatsoever for a car like this. And it's a nice way to have an interesting car without too much prejudice against it. In fact, who thought this was going to be on their 2025 bingo card? I think you'd get less hassle now for owning a Dodge Challenger than a Tesla. And ain't no Tesla sound like that. I can tell you, no siree. And the fact is, up until today, my only experience of a Challenger had been that fairly underwhelming rental car, which definitely didn't handle at all, didn't sound good, went okay, that was about it. This really is a lot more car, a lot more entertaining, and definitely worth your money. And it was certainly worth my time. So, Patrick, I want to say a big thanks to you for bringing it out, and as ever, to all of you for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button, comment down below, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you for the next one. Bye-bye.